Okay, we're going to reconvene our meeting, and we'll have the pledge. Rick, you want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome, everybody. I hope holidays. I know we certainly did. We met pretty much every day, it seemed like, in November and December, so we're back at it again. I'd like to just offer congratulations to Dublin resident and OSU football coach Urban Meyer on winning the Big Ten championship, the Sugar Bowl, and making history by leading the Buckeyes to the first ever college football national championship playoff game. So on behalf of City Council and the City Administration, I would encourage everybody in Dublin to show your Buckeye pride and support of Dublin neighbors, Coach Urban Meyer, his wife Shelley, and their children, Nikki, Gigi, and Nate. Participate in Dublin Scarlet and Gray Day on Monday, January 12th. And don't wear your Dublin green until after Tuesday, January 13th. We wouldn't want you to be confused as an Oregon Duck. So with that, you know, I noted that there was a town up in northern Ohio, Oregon, that's passed some legislation to change their name for that day as well. So I would hope that, I'm hoping we too can highlight Dublin's connection to the first ever national championship playoff by way of our resident, Coach Urban Myers. So with that, and we have a special presentation here, Certified Fleet Management Operation, Government Fleet Management Alliance, to be presented by James Schwab of GFMA. Welcome.
Mr. Schwab. Need to be over here.
I usually talk loud enough.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm James Schwab, Senior Consultant for Fleet Counselor Services. As you all know, 3 years ago, the City of Dublin decided they had a fleet manager to their table of organization. They brought Daryl Seiler on board. Daryl, knowing the value of teamwork, created a top-notch team at Fleet. This team made great strides in the past 3 years. A couple of their accomplishments are they brought a professional third party in to procure parts and supplies for their customers. They minimized downtime and provided additional services for their customers. They supervised the installation and maintenance of a state-of-the-art CNG fueling infrastructure. And the latest endeavor is a fully automated truck wash. The wash is scheduled to be fully operational this spring. While making these accomplishments, the team decided to certify their fleet. Fleet Counselor Services offers the only fleet certification program in the world. The certification program consists of 20 categories that compare the most important segments of fleet management to industry best practices. FCS has approximately 200 customers, half of which are working on their certification. The other half are just using the tools that are provided by the certification to help them manage their fleet. The certification is not an easy process. For example, one of the categories is the PM category, and it requires the fleet to be able to PM their vehicles that are due in the same month. They have to PM in the same month. 95% of them have to be completed. This not only requires a large effort on fleet, but it also requires an effort from the customers. They have to report timely to have their vehicles serviced. The other thing to remember is all these tasks were accomplished while still providing excellent service to their customers. I'd like to congratulate the City of Dublin, Marcia, and on their great accomplishment.
I would just like to say this reward really doesn't go to me. It first goes to council for all of your support and the funding that we get that allows us to do these things. Michelle for the efforts that she's made over the last few years under the administration of the fleet maintenance and management function. And then especially Daryl Seiler. I think you should stand up, Daryl. Daryl and his staff. I would encourage anybody on council to go over and just take a look at the facility and what they do, how they've taken care of the building, the fleet yard, everything that they do over there in our vehicles. The one thing that usually when we go to any fleet maintenance seminar is the fact that we could not provide our city services if our fleet was not in operation when you need it. So thank you to Daryl and all of your staff for the work that you do. This is your award. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Schwab, for coming out. They've done a great job up there. A lot of innovation. I know we had the Napa piece actually brought in-house, and I know from what I gather, that's paying big dividends, not only for us, but I think we might even be talking to the schools about maybe using that facility as well in the future, if not already. So.
Absolutely. I only touched on a couple of things. There was many more we could hear on weigh-ins.
Well, they're going to be very busy tonight, later. So we have plenty of salt, so maybe we ought to think about selling that to make some money. Thank you. With that, we have citizen comments. I see Claire Wolf has signed up. Claire, would you like to come forward and give us your name and address?
Members of council, thank you for the time. My name is Claire Wolf, and I've lived in Dublin since 1974. You can tell how old I am. I bring my notes on paper instead of on tablet. And when we first moved here, we were a village. And I have seen many changes in the last 40-plus years. Most of them I've been very pleased with, the way Dublin has grown and the way we've handled that growth. But I'm here this evening to please ask council to reconsider its recent action regarding the development process for the Bridge Street district. I believe it's 11414. Yeah, it's been on the planning board for 5 years, and I have followed it, and I followed the council meetings. But the devil's in the details, and we are now ready for those devilish details to be discussed. The Bridge Street project is huge, and it's transformative, and it's going to change the nature and the face of our city. And now is not the time, in my opinion, for speed and expediency in this process. I really have no doubt that the current council members have done this in good faith, that they are honorable people, and they have the best of intentions. But this change does not pass the smell test. It has raised the perception amongst a lot of people, in fact, everybody that I've heard and talked to, that this is not the correct time, the correct way to do this project. It brings back, to me at least, the good old days, or maybe it was the bad old days, when you would go to a council meeting and the developer would kind of be up there with the council members before the meeting and kind of slap them on the back and, you know, smile and good old boys and everything. And, you know, it would be a foregone conclusion on what was going to happen. And I haven't, like I said, heard any support for this change among any of the people that I've spoken to in my neighborhood, in reading the e-blogs, in reading the newspapers. As every government official knows, in fact, as any person knows, perception is reality. And this council's vote has engendered a negative perception and a great deal of distrust, I think, in the community. So I would ask the council to respectfully, to reconsider your action and rescind 11414. I would hope that the council is not so rigid that it can't change its mind, and reassure the citizens that this huge project can pass the same rigorous scrutiny that every other growth project in Dublin has gone through. Thank you for your time.
Very good, thank you. We also have another speaker signed up, Jamie Geese. You'd come forward and state your name and address.
Hello, my name is Jamie Geese. I live at 5550 Ashford Road. I'm here to comment on Ordinance 114-14 passed by City Council on December 8th. As you may already know, my family has been in Dublin for 8 generations, since settling here over 200 years ago. I grew up in Dublin, moved away for schooling and training, and I finally returned when I decided to marry and raise a family. I chose to return to Dublin not only because of my family roots here, but also because Dublin is a unique and special city. I have personally seen Dublin transform from a village in the 1970s into the wonderful, thriving city it is today. This change did not happen by random chance, but instead, it was a result of the hard work, wisdom, forward thinking, and integrity of previous City Council and planning and zoning members. My father served on both planning and zoning and City Council for 13 years during the 1970s and 1980s. I recall him missing several family dinners because he was attending meetings and often bringing his city work home in the evening. Previous City Council members, such as my father and others like him, with input from the Planning and Zoning Commissioners, made decisions that had profound impact on the development of the city. Simple decisions such as the passage of restrictive sign ordinances, requiring new developments to preserve existing trees and incorporate green space, requiring the construction of bike paths in all developments, and conservative limits on housing. Ordinances such as these were unheard of at the time and are just a few examples of decisions made many years ago that helped to create the Dublin of today. The overriding philosophy of previous City Council and Planning and Zoning members was controlled development to improve the city, not just development for the sake of growing the city. This was a team approach with both City Council and Planning and Zoning each having its own appropriate role. This process works exceptionally well for the past 50 years. It is from this perspective that I view City Council's recent amendment to the plan review process in the Bridge Street District, otherwise known as Ordinance 114-14. As a concerned and informed resident, I believe the decision made by City Council, and I look at the decision made by City Council, and for the best of me, I cannot see how it helps either the city or its residents. Developers have never been happy with the standards imposed by the city. All these standards imposed by the city cut into the developer's profit. But at the same time, it is these very standards which have led to the creation of current-day Dublin. The role of planning and zoning is and always has been to ensure that developments and developers improve or at a minimum maintain the quality of the city. The members in planning and zoning are not city employees. In contrast to the newly created members, or in contrast to the members of the newly created ART, and they're not elected officials, such as the members of City Council, who need to be concerned with the opinions of their electorate. They are private citizens who volunteer their time. As such, they're much less likely to be influenced by coercion or pressure from developers or other outside interests. Their job security or re-election is not on the line. It is this very fact that has allowed previous planning and zoning commissioners to help create the city we have today. Because they are required to uphold the standards for the development within the city, planning and zoning has in essence been the bad cop in the eyes of developers. However, because of their presence, City Council is relieved from assuming this role. I'll remind you again that this has worked exceptionally well for the past 50 years. The City of Dublin is blessed to have many highly qualified citizens with integrity who are willing to volunteer their time to serve in the Planning and Zoning Commission. As a result of City Council's decision, 4 of these highly qualified individuals, who in my review of recent Planning and Zoning meeting minutes seem to be the ones asking many of the hard questions, have now resigned. Currently, there are 4 vacancies on the Planning and Zoning Commission, which the city is required to fill. However, the city now faces the challenge of recruiting qualified citizen volunteers in an environment of controversy. I pray that 4 equally qualified individuals with a high level of integrity are willing to fill these vacancies, though I will admit I'm not optimistic. My fear is that because of this ordinance, the city has handicapped its ability to ensure that development within the Bridge Street District is of a high standard expected by the citizens of Dublin. One could argue that given the significant amount of taxpayer money being invested, development in the Bridge Street District being held to a high standard is inadequate. And instead, development should be held to an even higher standard in order to justify the city's significant expense. From where I am standing, I do not see how this ordinance has been beneficial to the city or its residents. Thus far, the city's explanation for the need for the amendment has consisted of the first 4 paragraphs of Ordinance 114-14 itself, which, when read in their entirety and interpreted in plain English, say essentially nothing, and a frequently asked questions webpage on the city website that explains the changes, but not their significance, and does nothing to explain the reason such a change was needed in the first place. Thus far, no convincing explanation of the need for a change has been presented. Dublin citizens expect and deserve an explanation. The general concern is that this change was made to appease developers in the Bridge Street District, an action which is not consistent with the type of government that helped create this wonderful city we live in today. I will leave you with 2 questions tonight, the answers to which many informed residents want to know. Why was Ordinance 114-14 passed into law? And how is this ordinance good for the City of Dublin and its residents, not just now, but for the next 50 years? If City Council cannot give citizens of Dublin good answers to these questions, I feel it is their duty to repeal Ordinance 114-14. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. That brings us to the portion of the agenda, the consent agenda. Does any council member have any item they'd like to have removed? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Moved.
Second?
Second.
Ann?
Ms. Saleh? Mr. Lacklider?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Genesee Zerker?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Peterson? And Vice Mayor Gerber?
Yes. Very good. Ordinance 115-14.
Authorizing execution of a development and tax increment financing agreement to facilitate construction of a residential development and provide for the construction of public infrastructure improvements relating thereto.
Mr. Fogler?
Yeah, actually, we don't have anything new or additional to present this time. Terry gave a very detailed presentation at the last council meeting. The memo providing the detail is included in the packet again. And so at this time, we don't have any additional information, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Very good. Council, any questions?
In light of Mr. Geese's comments that he just made to us, I wanted to point out, since this is one of the first projects in the Bridge Street corridor area coming forth, that in the memo written by Mr. Fogler and Ms. Muma, it specifically states that this agreement does not substitute or supersede any of the city's applicable development review and approval process. Somehow it's been construed that 114 and other conversations that have been had, that the area will not be going through planning and zoning process or BZA process or whatever the respective body is that's appropriate. And this is our first opportunity to point out that even in our own documents, we indicate that they will be going through. And I'm wondering if legal or somebody, or Marcia, if you might make a statement regarding what's written here.
Yeah, and similar to what you said, any of the projects that come through will be scrutinized as much as any other projects have in the past. And by the time they even get to this point, the review and work that the staff has done with the developer is probably more than what has been done in the past, just because of the size of the projects and the coordination with the infrastructure that's needed. And the one thing to clarify as far as the Bridge Street projects, the changes that were made, the amendment is to provide council with approval of the basic plan for those projects that include a development agreement. And the reason that was done is because of all the infrastructure and policy related decision that is council's authority to make and to enter the city into. So any other projects that do not include a development agreement will go through the normal process. Once council's reviewed the basic plans where there are development agreements, then council will choose to direct where those future the future plans will be reviewed, and that can be the P&Z, ARB, well, ARB if it's in the historic district. So yes, the normal process and approval for those projects that relate to the typical planning and zoning type issues, architecture, things like that, will be reviewed in all these projects.
There's just so much misinformation. Even the comments that we just heard, I believe I heard Mr. Geese say the new ART being formed. It's hardly new. ART's been around for, gosh,
A couple of years,
at least longer than that even.
A long time, yeah.
A long time, 3 or 4 years, I would say. So I know people get upset with change, and even something as minuscule as a park in a neighborhood, we hear from residents that say it's going to attract a bad element, it's going to create trash, it's going, I mean, a park, for heaven's sakes. So.
Well, and I think it's important to point out that City Council from the beginning of the Bridge Street, has had many, many public forums, hearings, presentations, with the whole goal to make sure the residents are involved and understand and have the opportunity to make comments and provide feedback to council. So I think this council, as well as the councils in the past, that they recognize and appreciate that the community has developed the way it has because we have involved the public and we do listen to what their comments are and take those into account when these projects move forward. So I think the idea that the goal is to speed the process up at the expense of quality couldn't be further from the truth. The goal is to have a quality project, but things like the infrastructure that's needed, that council's involved in that decision early on.
And I'm wondering if for the public's purpose, that you might describe and define what the ART's responsibilities are. As the mayor pointed out, it has been in existence for a number of years, but it has a very narrow responsibility that it can address because of its internal nature, really, was why it was designed the way that it is.
Right. The ART was envisioned as more of an administrative body that would opine on more minor projects. There are lots of signs, lots of preliminary review and recommendation on the bigger projects. They do keep minutes of their meetings, and so there is the opportunity to go back and look at the discussion and monitor how the body's operating. And I think we've discussed before, it's operating very much in line with what the intent was when it was created.
Well, it's a public meeting as well. I think that's important.
Yeah, it's notice. There's notice given, and
well, and they, if they are involved in something that would go to Planning Commission or ARB or council, they always make a recommendation. Our staff has always, our planning staff has always made a recommendation to whatever body, and this is just sort of an extension of that. They make recommendations, and then that body, in another public meeting, you know, takes apart that recommendation and makes a decision on it.
You know, it's interesting, there's no dissension on this council at all, and there's a tremendous amount of experience on this council. Many, many years of service for at least 4 or 5 years on Planning and Zoning Commission as well. You would think that if this was so far off base that we would have some dissension, and this council's absolutely in lockstep.
If I could speak to a couple things that I find interesting. One, I am the council liaison to the Planning Commission and have been attending since April. We've seen a number of Bridge Street projects during the course of just my tenure on the Planning Commission. And during that time, there haven't been any members of the public that have come and spoken about or provided input for these Bridge Street projects. And the Planning Commission has, in fact, expressed to me and others and staff expressed some frustration with these projects coming to Planning Commission, and certain things are talked about and decided, and then they come to council and they're talked about and decided, and those two things, and it's a frustration of ours as well. There might not be complete alignment. It's frustrating for the developer. It's frustrating for the Planning Commission, and this, you know, solves that in that these basic development parameters and pretty much the tension is over these public infrastructure pieces. And so that will be part of our review, because we're the ones, as was so eloquently stated, we're the ones that are going to be responsible for the public portion of these projects, and we are the body that is responsible and decides for that. So it seems to me that this is an improvement of the process, and I'm hoping that through all this, more people will come to the Planning Commission meetings, they'll be paying more attention, and they'll come and provide input into these projects that are coming up, because there will be, you know, a lot of activity at the Planning Commission. It's a shame.
I just want to, I think it's worth noting, these development agreements
People have left the meeting.
are not the result of any private negotiation between council or any council members. I repeat, not the result of any private negotiation between council and the developers. Any exchange that we have with the applicant, the developer, occurs in a meeting just like this, nowhere else. okay? So, you know, I don't know where the suggestion is coming from, you know, that there is, you know, some good old boy sort of thing going on here, but it's not happening here, and it's not happening with this council. I'm not aware that it ever has, but it hasn't in my experience on council.
Thank you. Anybody else?
No, I just want to say that from the emails I've read that there is a huge amount of misinformation being presented to people. And, you know, in all good heart, there are people that are concerned about our community as we are, and they, you know, bring this up. And it is a little tiring to explain this to everybody, what's exactly going on in the Bridge Street corridor. It is a very complicated issue. It's a very complicated development. The city is moving to keep the city current with the rest of the communities that are doing progressive things. It's not a destructive thing by any means. It's a way for us to provide housing for senior citizens and the young people that we're trying to attract into this community so that our children stay in this community and do not vacate this area after Ohio State and other universities spend tons of money educating them, and they decide to go to the cooler cities like Portland and Austin and other places like this. We have a moral obligation to do the best thing we can do to create the best environment we can for our youth and for the next generation of Dubliners. And that's what this group is doing. And it's really disheartening to hear some of the foolish comments that I have to read through in my emails that are not based on any fact whatsoever, that people are spreading around. That's very embarrassing because some of these people are my personal friends and they have run into this kind of misinformation. So I find it really upsetting to have to deal with this when you spend 19 jillion hours trying to build this community into something great, and your life, his endeavor is to do that. And everybody up here bleeds green and cares about this community. So that's just what I want to say, and I'm tired of it. Either get involved, read the material, understand the material, and then make some intelligent comments. Thank you.
It's clear, very clear that many of us here are very passionate about this subject, so thank you, John. Rick?
Yeah, I do have a question with regard to the ordinance. You know, I'm trying to go through the history here, Marcia, and it's my understanding this, what precipitated this, I mean, this has already gone through the Planning and Zoning Commission, is that correct?
They've had their basic plan review.
Yeah.
I don't recall when it was, but it has gone through
Right, which is
P&Z.
the typical process, and it's been fully vetted by them and so forth. It did come to us, I think, sometime in November, and then we're now here to deal with the economic piece of this, which, you know, I'll note, I was chair of P&Z for a number of years, and I remember when, you know, the hospital came. I remember, Tim, you were chair before me with respect to Cardinal, that development agreements are not something new in this community. You know, P&Z still did its thing, still vetted these projects, still required developers to a high level quality product. So, but the councils before this council and before that council did have that opportunity to look at the economics, particularly when we are putting together grids and streets and all these other things, and we are not building cornfields here. These are more of you know, those these are more complicated than building cornfields or building on cornfields. So council is going to have to be involved in that infrastructure somewhere up front to make sure if it makes economic sense for its taxpayers. That's what I understand going on.
That's correct.
Yep.
Similar to any of our economic development agreements, they typically relate back to, or a lot of the early ones you mentioned, Cardinal, relate back to providing the infrastructure that supports the development.
Yep. Very good.
I don't think the citizens understand that in this kind of development, almost every municipality in America has jumped in to support this. In the city of Dublin, when we were asked to kick in $50 million or whatever it was, turned them down. They had to go out and find their own monies. So there's no association in this. They're probably going to end up with a Port Authority type of finance situation to be able to fund this. So, and I really take offense at this. Somebody who was personally threatened, who has had lawsuits against me, in my years of serving this government, to hear somebody come up and talk about, oh, well, there's some kind of relationship. No, there isn't. These people up here are trying to build the future of this community to keep it progressive and modern and something that you want to live in. And that's our obligation. If we keep it the way it is, if any of you went to the meeting they had downtown at the Metropolitan Club, they explained to you that if you don't change the city, your city will fail. And we're trying to make this city the progressive city that it deserves to be, and we have spent our lives working on that. And I was party to all the laws that you mentioned, Jamie, the signage laws, the landscape laws, and every one of those laws. And we stuck our necks out, as you said, and we made a lot of people very unhappy coming up with progressive legislation. And this thing we're doing now is not a damn bit different from those days in the early 80s when I wrote a lot of those laws or either approved those laws. So that's what we're about, and that's what we're trying to get done here. Thank you.
Mary Lee has a question.
On the actual memo that you wrote, on page 2, under Phase 1, Public Improvements, second paragraph, I just wanted to be sure, it didn't state otherwise, but I just wanted to clarify that we had approved the materials that were going to be used in this area, and I'm assuming that the contributions and the cost and what they'll be responsible for above these noted here would include what we've already approved for the area, and that would not be considered exceptional, otherwise be customary. That would be customary for the area.
Yeah, the improvements that will be built, the roadways that are within their development, and then John Shields Parkway that's also in the development will be built to the standards that
we've
council
approved
adopted
already.
earlier this
Yes,
year.
thank you.
Terrific.
And one further point, Marcia, if I may, we beat this up. Now, once we pass this economic agreement, it's now going to go back through a process, correct?
Correct.
I mean, it's going to go back through, this won't go through ARB, but it will go back through staff for scrutiny, it will go through P&Z for scrutiny, all those sort of things for the quality of the architecture and all that good stuff, right?
That's correct. Right now, this one has basic development plan, basic site plan approval.
Okay.
And so it would go back to Planning Commission for development plan and site plan approval, provided it stayed, was still consistent. And they're submitting additional materials. So revision staff will go over all those. The staff reports will analyze those.
And I'm accustomed to reading codes, and that code is rather stringent, to say the least, and I'm sure we can all expect a very high-quality project because of those standards.
Very good. Anybody else?
Yeah, just real quick.
Peterson?
Marcia, the development agreements, only council has the authority to enter into a development agreement, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Could you give me an example? You mentioned Cardinal Health. What are some of the other development agreements this council has entered into that's the
Let me name the ways.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Emerald Parkway, pretty much any commercial office building that's along Emerald Parkway, there's some associated development agreement that was involved in the construction of that piece of Emerald Parkway. Perimeter Drive, going out west of the city, when at the time Rail Van came in, there was an agreement with them. And then we also have a lot of economic development agreements where we provide incentives to companies, typically a performance incentive to get them or incent them to locate into the city, and then they receive some type of reimbursement based upon the
OUs,
income tax revenues that are generated. OU. The hospital, we provided the access ramp or roadway into the hospital. So almost any major roadway in the city, especially where there's commercial development along the roadway, there's been a development agreement.
And so would it be fair to say Dublin would not be any near, it would look nothing like what it does if there weren't development agreements?
That's correct.
Okay. And is anything in the change that was made, does anything change the process for entering into the development agreement?
No.
Is it still just as public as it has always been?
Yes, it
And it's
is.
still this council that has always entered into them?
Yeah, all the development agreements come before council. We've always had 2 public readings of the development agreements. So yeah, it's strictly a public process that city council has to approve in an open public meeting.
And the approval of the development agreement now with Bridge Street is no different, right?
That's correct, it's the same.
And the review of every project that will eventually go into Bridge Street is no different, is that right?
That's correct.
There's just as an intense P&Z review, public input, all those things.
Yes, and the only thing that was changed was where there's a development agreement, with a Bridge Street project, that City Council reviews those basic plan reviews first.
Upfront, and then it can be referred to P&Z, just like it always has
Correct.
for all these years. And just a couple of other quick questions, and I see that there's conversation about taxpayer dollars being used for these developments, and right in the title, it's tax increment financing, and if I understand that, and I guess that's my question, I want to make sure I understand it, the only funds that are being committed are those that are being increased by the development themselves. It's not taxpayer dollars that is available to us to spend somewhere else.
That's correct. The tax increment financing recognizes the whole goal when the state established that mechanism or tool to do development was to provide for a mechanism that would allow the development to pay for the infrastructure that's needed to support their development. And one of the things the city's done very well to utilize that is not only have we been able to build infrastructure that supports the development, but it's also built infrastructure that supports the overall community and builds out our thoroughfare plan. And so the fact that we have a good planning process and we know where our roadways are going to go, it provides an opportunity for the city to use these other mechanisms. So, and the dollars can only be used for the capital costs or the capital improvements that are needed to support that development. Any improvement that's listed or used from the TIF or service payments we have to be able to show that it supports or benefits the parcels that are included in the district that's established.
And there's an annual meeting by the auditor to review all the TIFs, existing and ongoing.
Yeah, there's by Ohio law, there's
law.
a tax incentive review council, a TIRC meeting that we have typically in the spring, early summer of each year. The county auditors involved, and they're the ones that establish the values. They provide us with the information. We use their information to determine the timing of when we can do public projects so that we know that the funding's going to be available. And in most cases, the business or the project would not happen but for this incentive that we're providing.
Okay, and so this funding in this agreement is not taking away from other budgetary line items or anything else? Some people's parks aren't going to be nice and clean because we're spending the money up on Bridge Street. That's not the case?
No, and in a lot of cases, because we've been able to build an Emerald Parkway, 60% of it through TIF dollars, it allows us and frees up additional dollars that can be used that allows us to build the rec centers and have the parks and the amenities and the services that we have. So it's provided not only the infrastructure in the community, but it's also provided resources that we can use to allow other resources to use for other amenities that we wouldn't have been able to do.
And so all of the tools that we're using in this Bridge Street district, the only thing different, is that one tool is different in time than it might have been in another project? The city council reviewing the development agreement up front before referring it to P&Z?
Well, actually, in most cases, the development agreement doesn't go to P&Z. That's strictly a city council function.
Right, that's what I mean. I mean, it's the same exact tool that we have always used to get where we are.
That's correct.
The only other thing that I would say is, and I don't know of the 6, I'm obviously the newest member up here, but of the 6 people that serve here, I could not, I sit through all the meetings with these folks, and I have known their dedication for years and years and years, and if anybody enjoys living in the city of Dublin, in large measure, you have the people that are sitting up here to thank for it, and for anyone to suggest that they have something other than what's in the best interest of the city of Dublin, I can simply say as a person who interacts with them almost on a daily basis, it's simply not true. And if you want to know it firsthand, I would recommend people come to these meetings and listen, and come to the workshops, and come to all of the, and someone mentioned missing dinners. We're missing dinners tonight. We miss a lot of dinners. And it is simply not true that any of these people sitting up here are making some kind of a power grab or doing something that they believe is not in the best interest of the city. And it is, and it's upsetting to me and troubling when I think that those accusations aren't based or grounded in reality. And I hope that people that are concerned will take the time to look look at all of the facts and understand all of these things that Marcia just explained. Thank you for explaining that, Marcia, because I can tell you, I'm very comfortable planning on living here the rest of my years, and I would hope my children will live here as well, because it's going to continue to be a wonderful city because of people like this that are doing things like this. So, thank you.
Marcia, do you feel like you were on the witness stand? He's a pretty good cross-examiner, isn't he?
Yeah, it was pretty good, yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? If not, I'll ask for a vote on the ordinance. Ann?
Ms. Hennessy Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gerber?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Mayor Keenan?
Yes. Thank you. All right, I'll move to dispense with council rules of order in order to consider ordinances 116-14 and 118-14 together. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Vote on the
Vice
motion?
Mayor Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson? Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Hennessy Zerker?
Yes.
Ann, could you read the titles, please?
Ordinance 11614, declaring the improvement of certain parcels of real property in the city's Bridge District to be a public purpose and exempt from taxation, providing for the collection and deposit of service payments, specifying purposes for which those service payments may be expended, specifying public infrastructure improvements directly benefiting the parcels, and authorizing compensation payments to the Dublin City School District and the Tolles Career and Technical Center. And Ordinance 118, declaring improvements to certain parcels of real property in the city's Bridge Street District to be a public purpose and exempt from taxation, providing for the collections, deposit of service payments, specifying the purposes for which these service payments may be expended, authorizing compensation payments to the Dublin City School District and the Tolles Career and Technical Center.
Thank you. Ms. Muma?
Good evening, members of council. In conjunction with the ordinance that you just passed, which governs the development agreement for the Casto Toller Flats development, these two ordinances will establish two TIFs within the development area, one under Section 40 of the TIF code and one under Section 41 of the TIF code. As Marcia stated and as outlined in your staff memo, all the public infrastructure improvements are listed, including those that were agreed to within the development agreement. And with that, I would answer any questions that you might have.
Very good. Council, any questions?
No.
Hearing none, we'll ask for a vote on the ordinance 116-14 and 118-14 together.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson? Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Ms. Hennessy Zerker?
Yes.
Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
And Vice Mayor Gerber.
Yes.
Ordinance 123-14.
Authorizing the city manager to execute a release of easement for a sanitary sewer easement.
Mr. Hammersmith, you want to talk about lights and timing tonight, or?
Yes. Members of council, this quite simply is just a release of a sanitary sewer easement that is no longer needed for public purpose, located on property owned by 5 Digital along the north side of Innovation Drive, west of Emerald Parkway. There was an exhibit attached to your staff report that showed the location of this easement. There is no infrastructure within the easement. Staff does recommend that we do go ahead and release this easement and vacate it. And makes that recommendation to you this evening. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Very good. Council, questions? Hearing none, there'll be a vote on the ordinance. Ann?
Vice Mayor Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Ms. Hennessy Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson? Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ordinance 1-15.
Appointing a new city manager and authorizing an employment contract and declaring an emergency.
I'll introduce it.
Very good. I see we have a report from the administrative chair. Rick?
Yes, thank you. Well, I think first off, I want to thank all of my colleagues for all of their hard work, all the time and effort that we went through here from August on. We had an awful lot of meetings, and it was a national search, extensive search, exhaustive search, and I want to thank all of you for all of your hard work and dedication toward that end. I'm excited to introduce this. Dana McDaniel, in my opinion, in all of our opinion, is the right person at the right time for this position, and it's a very exciting choice for us. And we're all very excited to get moving. The reason for moving forward this evening is, as we stated in our city manager profile some months ago, we wanted to get time for the transition to take place, as Marcia is leaving here on effective January 31st. 30th, right? I'm sorry, I keep trying to say at the end of the month, and I know it's the 30th.
Come on, you can stay one more day.
Come on. Where's the loyalty?
So tonight, we're asking to move forward with this. With respect to the contract overall, the content and the terms are generally what I would consider standard, consistent with prior city manager agreements. The specific terms with respect to compensation are consistent with the published city manager profile and commensurate with the acumen and mutual expectations of all the parties. So with that, I would move to dispense with the public hearing and treat this as an emergency and ask for a second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. On the motion?
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
And on the ordinance?
Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gerber?
Yes.
And Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Anyone come forward? Be the first to congratulate you. Everybody have a hand?
Well, just quickly want to say thank you very much for, obviously, for passing the ordinance on an emergency basis. Appreciate that. But I just want to say, Lisa, my wife Lisa and I are very happy, very proud to be able to continue to serve this community. And it's been a great 26 years. I look forward to a few more. And big shoes to fill, but I think Marcia will get my head on straight here before she retires. So I look forward to supporting City Council, working shoulder to shoulder with this great staff that we have, and continuing to serve the great residents and businesses of the City of Dublin. So thank you for the opportunity.
Glad I don't need that cane anymore. Okay, that brings us to ordinance 415.
Authorizing the city manager to execute a development and real estate exchange agreement and the necessary conveyance documentation to acquire 1.20 acres more or less fee simple interest from the Central Ohio Transit Authority located adjacent to and north of Dale Drive in exchange for 3.326 acres more or less fee simple interest owned by the city located east of Emerald Parkway, north of Bright Road, for the replacement of a Coda Park and Ride.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Mr. Fogler?
Thank you. The agreement tonight relates to an exchange of real estate as well as some improvements that the city would make in Coda's behalf. The reason this agreement's moving forward this evening, as you may be aware, one of the critical central roads in the Bridge Street District is this central signature circulator loop that John Shields Parkway forms a portion of. And to the southern end of the district, east of the river, there's a roadway known as, at this point, Bridge Park Avenue. That'll be a similar east-west road that'll eventually provide connectivity from Riverside Drive all the way to Sawmill. So it'll be a very important east-west connector as well as a road that distributes traffic throughout the district. This is the road that has the cycle track located on it as well as the more amenitized version of the roadway. Council authorized the acquisition of real estate from Wendy's Corporation in December. That's one of the other key missing links, and with the acquisition and development agreement that's before you tonight, really all of the real estate for this segment of the roadway from Riverside Drive, really to provide connectivity all the way to the east and Sawmill, will be provided. The site in question has been dealt with by the city, since we have another governmental entity, Coda, having a park and ride facility on Dale Drive. You may be familiar with that facility, 1.2 acres approximately. The new roadway alignment goes directly through the middle of that site. So we've been working with Coda for some time to try to find an alternate location, since we think that is an important public service that serves our district, and have looked through a lot of different scenarios and fortunately found excess real estate that the city acquired and needed as a result of the roundabout for Riverside Drive, or for the new Emerald Parkway and Bright Road roundabout. That roundabout required us to acquire a series of homes along Bright Road, just east of that new alignment on the northeast corner, and we have over 3 acres of excess land at that location. After analysis with Coda, looking at the various services provided and users and ridership with the current facility, as well as projected future growth, some of the other facilities, and the serviceability of that site for buses and the connectivity provided by Emerald Parkway itself, it was deemed to be an excellent site for the proposed relocation. So the arrangement we have struck tentatively, subject to council approval and subject to final zoning arrangements, would involve essentially CODA delivering the site that they own on Dale Drive to the City of Dublin as one key feature. Another feature would be that Dublin would provide the land that it owns on the northeast corner of Emerald Parkway and Bright Road to CODA. City would oversee the design and construction of the new park and ride facility and would bear the costs associated with replacing 84 spaces. 84 spaces are the amount of parking spaces in the current facility. CODA would bear the cost for any oversizing of that facility beyond that, and they're currently contemplating a 170-space facility, as well as the land in excess of the acreage needed to build the 84-space facility. So those extra incremental costs would be borne by CODA as part of this agreement. Luckily, we had independent appraisals done for both sites, and they both ended up at $220,000 per acre, so we're dealing with areas where we don't have to make those adjustments. So on the per acre kind of considerations, we're very, very similar. And the current design and construction estimates, and these could get refined slightly between your second reading here, but we think they're very good at this point, and the agreements will provide the provisions around which these distribution occurs, is that the 170-space facility will cost about $1.27 million, of which about $780 would be the estimated cost for the 84 replacement park and ride spaces at this point. We think for lots of reasons this presents a very good option for us here, can do it in a timely fashion. This would be probably the last remaining piece of real estate needed for this roadway and some of the redevelopment of adjacent areas. And at your second meeting in January, we'd recommend that council take action to authorize city manager to enter into this agreement. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Very good. Council, any questions? Hearing none.
I actually
okay, go ahead.
do. Mr. Fogler, can you describe, this is a development agreement and a real estate exchange with CODA that we're being asked to approve at second reading, but how will this process work for CODA? What's this place going to look like? Is this going to go to P&Z? Can you describe that process?
Yeah, the site needs to be rezoned, and that's one of the contingencies in this agreement. The zoning that it would go for is consistent with the land use recommendations of the plan. I believe it's a suburban office designation on there, which is the only zoning designation within which park and rides are listed as conditional uses. So in addition to be zoned, and we think in a manner totally consistent with the plan, it also has to go through a conditional use permitting process, which is in the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. So the Planning Commission will have to approve the conditional use for this use going forward. There'll be public meetings, both for the rezonings as well as the subsequent conditional use permits, and is typical in these kinds of fashions. The planning staff has reached out to and is holding organizational meetings with the neighborhood to get them up to speed and get their input on the design and layout of this project early on.
So the landscaping and what the shelters will look like and all that is in the purview of the Planning Commission as
Lighting,
well.
all those considerations will be there.
And with the public input.
Yes.
Thank you.
When is that meeting, Terry? Just in case there's somebody watching that doesn't know.
This coming Wednesday. That's at the Washington Township Firehouse on Hard Road.
Good.
At 6, is it? 6:30.
Thanks for illuminating that, Amy. Anybody else? If not, there'll be a second reading, public hearing January 26th.
Thank you.
Meeting, so, thank you. Resolution 4-15.
I'm sorry, authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for the construction of the 270 US 33 interchange upgrade Phase 1.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Ms. Muma?
Yes, this legislation is very similar to a resolution that was passed in August of 2014, and it is really final legislation authorizing a contract with the Ohio Department of Transportation, or ODOT, and the City of Dublin for the construction of the I-270 33 interchange. The parameters are the same as what was outlined in the August legislation. It In particular, it outlines what the city is responsible for funding, and it is in conjunction with everything that has been discussed in the past on the construction of this interchange. Ultimately, the City of Dublin is going to be funding a base $8 million of the total $33 million construction costs, along with 100% of anything additional that Dublin elects that would be outside of the scope of a normal interchange project. With that, I will answer any questions you may have.
Very good. Council, questions? No other discussion? Ann?
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson? Mr. Nazir Zerker?
Yes.
Ms. Salee? Yes. Vice Mayor Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Thanks to everybody for their hard work. This has been a long-time project. We're finally getting there. I think construction starts next year.
This year.
This year.
Well, I
Actually,
know we're tearing trees
today-
out right now.
Today, they started the clearing
Well,
of...
this is this year.
Yeah, and it'll be bid in February,
Sorry.
and construction should start in March.
Terrific. Okay. That'll bring us to Resolution 5-15.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into a joint use agreement between the City of Dublin and the Ohio Board of Regents.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you, Dana.
Good evening, members of council. You might recall that earlier in 2014, the Ohio General Assembly, through its capital budget, appropriated $300,000 to the Board of Regents to be used by the City of Dublin in the effort to make live a 100 gigabit capable fiber optic backbone available for both research and education purposes. In order to receive the funding, Ohio Administrative Code requires that we enter into an agreement with the Chancellor of the Board of Regents to set the conditions to receive this funding. So this legislation enables that. If you do pass it tonight, and attached to that is a draft of that joint use agreement. So we recommend passage of this resolution so we can make a couple more steps towards receiving that funding.
Very good. Questions, council? Ann?
Mr. Nazir Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson? Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gerber?
Yes.
Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Thank you, Dana. Resolution 6-15.
Authorizing the City of Dublin to enter into an amendment to the December 14, 1998 agreement between the City of Dublin and the Dublin Development Company, LLC.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you, Dana.
Yes, so as you know, the Dublin Development Corporation is the keeper of the conduit system that runs through City of Dublin that holds our fiber optic system. But that conduit system is made available for lease to multiple users for fiber to people who provide fiber optics. What we're proposing tonight is an amendment to the fee structure that is a part of the Dublin franchise agreement, which was passed quite a few years ago. And this simply is modifying fees relative specifically to what's referenced as Phase 4 in a map that was provided in your staff report, specifically Emerald Parkway Phase 8, and also in the Tuller Road area where there's utilities being buried. This fee structure, actually, changes in this fee structure actually better replicate or will better serve the costs incurred by Dublink Development LLC for the extension of the conduit systems that have been put in place to accommodate fiber optics.
Very good. Council? Questions? If not, Dan?
Ms. Salee? Yes. Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Nazir Zerker?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Thank you.
Thanks, Dana. Resolution 7-15.
An intent to appropriate a 0.006 acre more or less fee simple interest from the estate of Basil Brown for the property located off Riverside Drive, north of Dale Drive for the realignment of Riverside Drive.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Ms. Friedler?
Hi. Good evening, council members. As you know, most of the property necessary for the relocation of Riverside Drive has been acquired by the city, but in doing those appropriations, we've identified that very small sliver of property, and we're having difficulty in determining the owner of that .006 acre parcel. It appears to be vested in the estate of Basil Brown. And this resolution will simply allow us to begin the appropriation process to clear title.
Very good. Any questions? Ann?
Mr. Nazir Zerker?
Yes.
Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson? Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gerber?
Yes.
Mayor Keenan?
Yes. All right, then. That brings us to other. We have a tree waiver request, Stansbury at Muirfield Village. And I see Ms. Husak is ready to enlighten us.
Good evening, council members. I just have a very quick presentation. We received this tree waiver request toward the end of the year for the Stansbury at Muirfield Village development, which was approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council in 2013. Outlined here in yellow is the site, which is just east of Drake Road. It's the old Buckner Farm there in the middle of the northern portion of Muirfield. Here is an older aerial photo, obviously, from the site. It's about 12 acres, and there were portions of it that were heavily wooded toward the rear specifically. There's also a stream corridor protection zone that runs along the sort of center of the site and then from the north to the south. Here is the preliminary development plan, the zoning that was approved, as I said, by the Planning Commission as well as City Council. And it included 18 lots there shown in the brown color and one road, public road, into the site with a cul-de-sac bulb there at the end. The stream corridor protection zone is also shown there, as well as the stream and the stormwater management area. And in dark green, behind lots 1 through 12, is a tree preservation zone that the applicant has included, particularly for those lots to provide areas for tree preservation. There are also 4.5 acres of open space within this development, which will be owned and maintained by Muirfield, actually, and that area also provides for tree preservation. The request is for a waiver. The applicant is proposing to remove 162 trees, which, given their sizes, is about 1,500 inches. And those are protected trees, the ones that the code would determine to be in fair or good condition at a size of 6 inches or above in diameter. Typically, the requests for a tree waiver are for a tree-for-tree replacement for trees that are less than 24 inches in diameter, and then an inch-for-inch replacement for trees above 24 inches, which are also referred to as landmark trees. I'm sure you recall, City Council adopted a tree waiver policy in 2001 with 2 guidelines, 2 waivers, and those are whether or not the site meets applicable development standards and whether or not measures have been taken to reduce the impact of construction on existing trees. We have been working with the applicant really throughout 2014 to identify areas where replacement trees could take place, and given the heavily wooded site and the mature trees along the boundaries, we have determined that all of the replacements really cannot fit on the site and survive, and therefore the applicant is here to request the waiver. Here is the replacement plan that shows replacement trees within the tree preservation zone as well as in the open spaces wherever they may fit. And these replacement trees are above and beyond the trees that the code requires the applicant provide, which would be street trees and on-lot trees, which on these types of lots, it's between 2 and 3 trees. So those do not count in replacement, and they're not shown on this plan. And then here, just like in our staff memo, is the request in more detail, showing essentially that non-landmark trees removed is 161, which totals 1,480 inches. There's 1 landmark tree to be removed, which is 28 inches in size. And what that replacement requirement would be if it was per the ordinance, which is 1,508 inches, or $150,800. And with the waiver that would be based on the tree waiver policy, that inch number would be reduced to 430, and the dollar amount would be reduced to $43,050. The tree replacement plan that I showed you showed a little bit more replacement than what the waiver would grant. Essentially 189 trees or 472 inches, which is the line there on the very bottom. So with that, the applicant is here to answer any questions that you may have. Staff is recommending approval of the waiver. As we have said, we have worked with them to work on a layout of the site early on that preserves trees, has tree preservation zones, and then also find areas within the site that have potential for replacement trees to accommodate and also for them to grow and survive and not shade out or crowd out existing trees.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council questions? Mayor Lee?
The lots as depicted, are we to assume that none of the trees on the lots will be saved? Is that correct? Let's just say 18 through 14 there.
The existing trees in the areas shown in brown?
Right.
So that really is sort of a function of where the house footprint will be.
Right. I'm just curious if any of the existing trees would be saved or if the lot's going to be cleared. Probably to fit the grading plan, but I'm not sure, and I just want to find out.
True. I'm sure Jason has a little better idea of the footprint of the homes proposed here.
Okay. I have questions.
Yeah, do you want to answer that question and then we'll move on?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Members of council, my name is Jason Francis with MI Homes. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you here tonight. Yes, Mr. Reiner, all of the trees on the backs of these lots are likely to be able to be saved. We've done a grading and drainage plan that can accommodate most of these trees. The lots are exceptionally deep. There aren't a huge number of trees on the backs of lots 14 through 18 specifically, but we don't propose removing any of those trees on the backs of those lots. I would simply point out also on the plan Claudia had shown previously, it doesn't show trees less than 6 inches. We've gone back out and located those. Your code doesn't require locating trees less than 6 inches. There's probably several hundred additional trees on the site. We've located those to sort of fill in the gaps to help us understand where we have room to plant those trees, and our proposed landscape plan is based upon that.
Okay.
So I had a question on this, more for Claudia, I think, on this box that you gave us. So is the staff recommending no fee or that there be $43,000 fee?
If council were to grant the waiver like you have granted waivers in the past, the applicant would be able to replace the required amount, so there would be no fee.
Oh, okay. That would be by us approving the replacement as proposed.
Correct.
What was the 43,000 though, if there's no replacement?
Exactly.
That would be the fee that would be paid?
Correct.
Okay.
If you approved the waiver, so the option
Correct.
would be replacement or paying the fee.
Okay.
They would be replaced.
Amy?
I had a couple questions on the rendering that we have, and I'm not sure who will answer. First of all, there is a tree that is circled. It looks like there's a number 480. It's looks like between 7 and 8. What is that? Is that a tree that's going away, or is that a big tree that's being saved?
It's a big tree that's being saved.
Okay. And then you mentioned that we are losing one landmark tree. Where is that landmark tree?
I have an exhibit that shows that, Claudia. I don't know if you have the ability to put it up there or if I can just pass out copies, if that's okay.
Up to you. How do you have the exhibit?
Just a little 8.5 by 11.
No, I'm no help.
Sorry. It's in the middle of lot 11. That looks like it's a pretty good representation.
Yeah, we don't have it on our rendering.
Okay.
We don't have that.
Pretty accurately on the middle of lot 11.
Okay. So what would it take to save that tree? Because that's the one hang-up that I have is, we're losing landmark trees, and we've got, other trees proposed.
That's a 28-inch black walnut tree, which
right.
Black walnut obviously is a quality tree. It's been evaluated on 2 different occasions, initially in fair condition. It's also been considered in poor condition. When the survey was originally done, though, it was fair, and that's why it does fall into the category of being subject to the tree replacement.
So is it fair or is it poor?
With the preliminary development plan that was approved and the tree survey done at the time, the assessment was that it was considered to be in fair condition. The tree is quite a bit larger, from a drip line standpoint than the symbol that's represented on Lot 11. So Lot 11 wouldn't be buildable if we were to try to save that tree.
Okay, well, that's my sticking point. I really don't want to lose that tree.
Anybody else?
The concern of the residents, and you've got them on both sides of this project, is, looking into the back of the houses and, this new project appearing. I guess I have a question for you. The interior row of trees that front the backs of the lots, was there any thought in ever making those evergreen trees so that we can get the privacy issue resolved with the neighbors? Dollar for dollar, if you did a 7 to 8 foot Norway spruce, it'd be the same, and maybe even a little bit less than, maple or an oak, but it would maybe do a little more to accomplish the concerns of the residents. So
We would certainly be open to a mix of pine trees, evergreen trees.
Well, you'd only want to use spruce trees because pine trees have diplodium disease in this particular corridor, so they're all dying. So, and that's coming down through Delaware County. So you wouldn't want to put those in there. But, I'm just wondering, since that was one of the biggest concerns of the residents is, the privacy part of this project, that row of trees that actually borders the property lines of the subdivision and not the shade trees on the outside, which I see you're mixing into the existing forest, which makes sense. If you could consider putting those in an evergreen elements, like making that row of trees 8 to 10 foot, either Norway spruce, Colorado blue spruce, or Colorado green spruce, something that's not susceptible to the diplodium disease.
Certainly. We would definitely be willing to intersperse those species. I just wanted to point out, we have expanded the tree preservation zone from the time the preliminary development plan was approved. We have a 40-foot tree preservation zone on lots 1 through 5, 35-foot on lots 6 through 11. The 30-foot tree preservation zone on the rear of lots 11 through 13 has remained because of the dimensions of those lots. And then we've added a tree preservation zone to the backs of lots 14 through 18. And these are areas where we're proposing to plant trees, obviously in addition to saving those that are already there. And then there's obviously the 30-foot open space behind lots 14 through 18 as well.
Yeah, and what I'm considering here and what I'm suggesting is, the trees that are lined up on the back property line, I assume that for you to build your houses, you're going to probably grade out the lots, put up your environmental water, your mud trap barriers, clean the lot out pretty much, and regrade them to the specific grading plan. So what I'm suggesting is that perhaps on the ones that are sitting exactly on the back property line, that those might become evergreen elements, and then of course you go ahead with the deciduous plan that you have.
Okay.
So help me out here, Marcia. How would we propose that? Would we amend this, or would it come back with a revised plan, or?
Well, I think
they can work with the staff on this.
Yeah, I think that if council approves the waiver with the information that's provided, we can make sure that
It gets done that way.
the trees are planted.
Our next step,
Right.
and pending tonight's action, is we are moving forward with the final development plan, which will include the landscape plan that we'll take to Planning Commission. So we would incorporate those comments at that time.
Okay.
Quick
Mr.
question.
Peterson?
Claudia, you made an interesting comment that there's the 2 criteria here, and I understand that there's 2 waiver guidelines, but then it seems like this third one's kind of added, that is not to burden new development by adding unreasonable costs. Is the cost aspect taken into consideration in the waiver guidelines?
No, that is more of how the waiver came about as to why the waiver was even considered.
Okay,
what's the
because what
cost.
you had said before, that I was concerned about that, but then you said something that made a lot of sense to me, that you said if they replaced all of these trees that the code would require, that they wouldn't do well. That makes sense to me. I can understand that. If we're approving this waiver because it's just too expensive to do it, I'm not as inclined to agree with that, but what you're saying is from a pragmatic standpoint, you can't put that many replacement trees on and have them survive.
Especially if you look at it on, out there versus plan view, not all the trees are shown, it's only the ones 6 and above, and you have like a little bubble on a plan. When you're out there, it's denser, and there's a lot of smaller trees there that are not shown on the plan.
That all makes sense to me, that the financial concern, I guess, is a component, but it's not as important as the other, these guidelines, I guess. Okay, thank you.
All right, anybody else? Okay. Is there a motion to approve staff recommendation?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Ann?
Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson? Ms. Salee?
No.
Mr. Reiner? Vice Mayor Gerber? Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerke?
Yes.
And staff can get a copy of that to John for his review, the final landscape plan. I'd be interested to have him look at it.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to staff comments.
No comments.
No comment?
No comment.
You've only got a few more weeks. Okay.
That's why she's no comment.
No comment. Working on it. Council committee reports. We have the P&Z rep, Ms. Soleil.
We have had no meetings since our last meeting. I have nothing to add.
All set. Rick, anything for admin?
I'm kind of running out of jobs after the city manager search. Just remind everybody that we will interview selected applicants for appointment to the Planning and Zoning Commission which will take place November 13th and 14th. And we'll send to all of us in the next day or so more particulars. I think we're anticipating starting around 6 o'clock, and and we'll go from there. So more to come.
Thank you. Finance, Marilee.
Nothing to report.
Community development, John.
No, the entire community is involved in community development.
Very
so-
good, and you were very passionate to speak to that.
Well,
Thank you.
it's a sensitive issue.
And public services, Amy?
I had been granted the blessing of my fellow council members to talk about the public open space matter and being privately maintained, and based on the waiver requests that we've gotten. We need to schedule that meeting, but I'm thinking maybe early February, once we get some of these other things taken care of. So I will ask Ann to perhaps poll for some dates that might work for my fellow committee members, Tim and John.
Okay, very good. Anything from DAC, John?
No.
Arts Council, Board of Education, Greg? Warpsy, Marilee?
No.
And US 33, Tim? Nothing. Council Roundtable, Greg?
Just 3 things jumped out at me of the packet about what makes Dublin such a great place to live. This walk in the park, the volunteers going around and inventorying every park in the entire city was a wonderful idea and a wonderful project. The skate park is a really neat idea. And the block party packages that any neighborhood can get one time free of charge just by calling up and scheduling with the city. That just 3 examples of what making Dublin such a great place. And congratulations, Dana. Looking forward to continuing to work with you. That's all.
Very good. Amy?
I do not have anything. Thank you.
Marilee?
No, thanks.
Tim?
No, thank you.
Mr. Reiner?
No, thank you.
Rick? I guess I would just add what incredible foresight this council had to move the meeting from the 12th back to the 5th, even before, and I think we should take full credit for the Buckeyes moving on, that they weren't, I think, ranked any more than 6th or 7th at that time, that we made that decision in October, maybe even higher, and look what's happened, so. But we knew, so stay tuned. Unless we schedule a meeting for the 12th, which is likely, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Oh, we're going into, I'm sorry, I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session for personnel.
So moved.
Okay, is there
second.
And we will not be making any, decisions coming out of that, so that we'll stand adjourned as soon as we depart.
Mr. Reiner?
Thank you.
Mr. Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson? Ms. Salee?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Gerber? Ms. Janice Zerker? Mayor Keenan?
Yes.
Is she on this list, though?